I think I'm going to read before I take your fascinating questions from this part from the beginning. This book is about a kid named Miles who memorizes the last words of famous people, which some of you will know is a habit that I have also acquired. And the last words of the French poet Francois Rabelais were, "I go to seek a great perhaps." This young man, Miles, is inspired by these last words to go and seek his great perhaps at a boarding school in Alabama. And he goes to the boarding school and he immediately falls in love with this girl named Alaska. I'm going to read this part because it has smoking in it, which is very much in the sense of the POV. Then I'm going to talk briefly about smoking, then I'm going to take your questions. I'd be lying if I claimed I became a smoker to ward off insects. Oh right, he's sitting on this porch swing by a lake. There's an evil swan in the lake who plays an important role later in the novel. I'd be lying if I claimed I became a smoker to ward off insects. I became a smoker because 1, I was on an Adirondack chair by myself, and 2, I had cigarettes, and 3, I figured that if everyone else could smoke a cigarette without coughing, I could too. In short, I didn't have a good reason, so let's just say 4, it was to ward off the bugs. I made it through 2 entire drags before I felt nauseated and dizzy and only semi-pleasantly buzzed. I got up to leave. As I stood, a voice behind me said, "So do you really memorize last words?" She ran up beside me and grabbed my shoulder and pushed me back onto the porch swing. "Yeah," I said, and then hesitantly I added, "You want to quiz me?" "JFK," she said. "That's obvious," I answered. "Oh, is it now?" She asked. "No, those were his last words. Someone said, 'Mr. President, you sure can't say that Dallas doesn't love you.' And then he said, 'That's obvious.' And then he got shot." She laughed. God, that's awful. I shouldn't laugh, but I will. Then she laughed again. "Okay, Mr. Famous Last Words boy, I have one for you." She reached into her overstuffed backpack and pulled out a book. Gabriel Garcia Marquez, The General and His Labyrinth, absolutely one of my favorites. It's about Simón Bolívar. I didn't know who Simón Bolívar was, but she didn't give me time to ask. It's a historical novel, so I don't know if this is true, but in the book, you know what his last words are? And then she lit a cigarette and sucked on it for so hard for so long that I thought the entire thing might burn off in one drag. She exhaled and read to me. He, that's Simón Bolívar, was shaken by the overwhelming revelation that the headlong race between his misfortunes and his dreams was at that moment reaching the finish line. The rest was darkness. "Damn it," he sighed. "How will I ever get out of this labyrinth?" I knew great last words when I heard them, and I made a mental note to get a hold of a biography of this Bolivar fellow. Beautiful last words, but I didn't quite understand. "So what's the labyrinth?" I asked her. Her mouth close enough to me that I could feel her breath warmer than the air. She said, "That's the mystery, isn't it? Is the labyrinth living or dying? Which is Bolivar trying to escape, the world or the end of it?" I waited for her to keep talking, but after a while, it became obvious she wanted an answer. "I don't know," I said finally. "Have you really read all those books in your room?" She has a lot of books in her room. That should go without saying, maybe that wasn't necessary. She laughed. "No, I've only read maybe a third of them, but I'm gonna read them all. I call it my life's library." I'm gonna skip ahead. Later, I walked toward the dorm circle by Alaska. The cicadas hummed their one-note song just as they had back home in Florida. She turned to me as we made our way through the darkness and said, "When you're walking at night, do you ever get creeped out, and even though it's silly and embarrassing, you just want to run home?" It seemed totally too secret and personal to admit to a stranger, but I told her, yeah. For a moment, she was quiet. Then she grabbed my hand, whispered, "Run, run, run, run," and took off, pulling me behind her. So that's a chapter, a brief chapter from Looking for Alaska. The one thing I want to say about cigarettes in the context of the larger thing that I'm saying is that I think books are very good at helping us think about what to think about. I think that they're very bad at modeling behavior or like telling us how to act, right? Like, I like Twilight, which I don't know if you say you've read them. You probably, there are some dudes here who probably haven't read them. Twilight, there are these books about this vampire named Edward Cullen and this girl named Bella. I like Twilight. I really do. I don't read Twilight and want to, you know, like date a vampire who drives an Aston Martin. Because books are not in the business of modeling behavior or teaching us how to act. books are in the business of teaching us what to think about. And from that perspective, the smoking in the novel, I think, changes dramatically because the characters in the book who smoke are clearly aggressively self-destructive, and they are seeking out ways to find socially acceptable ways to hurt themselves, which is something that a lot of teenagers go through, and I know I went through. There's this thing that's inside of you that you can't quell, that you just want to destroy yourself. You just want to implode. You just want to find a way to like get at the pain. And I think that for teenagers of my generation who knew that smoking was the stupidest, like most expensive, just stupid, lame thing that you could do, the only reason to do it was because you were engaging that self-destructive impulse. You were trying to find a way. Now that's obviously what's happening with the smoking in the novel, and I think that when you think of books as a way of getting to what to think about instead of as a way of like learning like what to do on a Tuesday, I think that you get a lot more out of the reading experience, and I also think that they totally don't work for like what to do on a Tuesday. Like if I read a book that's like about a boy who like shouldn't buy a gun, but then he buys a gun and then he shoots off his foot, I don't really think it affects my chances of buying a gun, which are admittedly very low. But like, even if they weren't low, I don't think that it would affect my chances of buying a gun, because that's not what books are in the business of doing. We have lots of great voices for that kind of behavior modeling. So that was the last thing I was going to say, and now I will take your many fascinating questions. Yeah.